Welcome to the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery.
Ever feel like you're stuck on a treadmill? Always striving for perfection, but never quite reaching it, like you're constantly pushing yourself, but that finish line just keeps moving further away.
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
Well, today we are diving deep into that very feeling, anxious perfectionism. We'll be unpacking a fascinating book called The Anxious Perfectionist by Clarissa W. Ong and Michael P. Twohig.
Oh, interesting.
And to help us navigate this tricky terrain, we have with us an expert in psychology and behavior change.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a topic that I think resonates with a lot of people because who hasn't felt that pressure to be perfect? I mean, in some area of their lives, right?
Exactly. But what's interesting is that the book doesn't just, demonize all perfectionism. It actually draws this distinction between adaptive and maladaptive perfectionism.
Right. That's a really important distinction.
Here.
Yeah. So think of like an athlete, like the athlete who trains relentlessly to break a world record. That drive can be incredibly motivating, right? And fulfilling, pushing them to achieve, incredible things. That's adaptive perfectionism.
I see.
But now picture the student who's pulling all-nighters, paralyzed by the fear of getting anything less than an A.
Yeah.
Even if it means sacrificing their health and well-being.
Oh, wow.
That's where that maladaptive perfectionism takes hold.
So it's not about not wanting to do well. It's more about the motivation behind it and then also the price that we pay, right?
Exactly. And this is where the book, I think, really shines. It uses this brilliant analogy of perfectionism being like a rigged game.
Oh, okay.
The authors argue that perfectionism sets these impossible standards. So you're constantly striving for something that's ultimately unattainable. And so it leads to these feelings of inadequacy, no matter what your achievements are.
So even when you win, you actually lose.
Yeah. That's the insidious thing about this rigged game. Whether you keep chasing that, elusive perfection or give up entirely, you end up losing something, right?
Yeah.
Your sleep, your relationships, your peace of mind.
Because you're constantly making that trade. You're trading something for that elusive reward, that feeling of being good enough.
And the book really drives home this point that this reward, it rarely materializes. You can spend years making these transactions, sacrificing so much, only to find that sense of, quote, good enough always seems just out of reach.
It's like you're stuck in this perpetual cycle of striving and never arriving. But why do we fall into this trap in the first place? Where does this need to be perfect even come from?
Well, the book points to a few key factors, including, early experiences and societal pressures. Think about the messages, right? We're just bombarded with every day, be the best, never give up, strive for excellence. It's no wonder we, internalize this pressure to be perfect.
It's almost like we're conditioned to believe that our worth is directly tied to our achievements.
Exactly. And this conditioning can manifest in a couple of really damaging ways. First, there's that relentless self-criticism, that inner voice that's constantly, whispering, you're not good enough, or you're a failure.
Ugh, yeah. I think we all know that voice. It's like having this constant stream of negativity just playing in the background.
Yeah. And then there's this rigid adherence to rules and standards, right?
Yeah.
You feel compelled to follow these strict expectations no matter the cost.
Oh, yeah.
And the book gives this really relatable example of needing to make the right decision.
Oh, I know that one.
Every single time.
Yeah. It's like you're paralyzed by indecision because you're terrified of making the wrong choice.
And this ties into what the book calls the coherence trap.
Ooh, okay. Now that sounds intriguing. Tell me more about this coherence trap.
It's basically our brain's way of trying to make sense of the world, even if it means distorting, reality to fit our expectations. It's that need to have a neat, consistent narrative, even if that narrative doesn't actually serve us. And what's fascinating is that this need for coherence, this need to be, quote, right all the time, can actually fuel our anxiety.
So it's like our brain is almost working against us. It's trying to create order and certainty in a world that's inherently messy and unpredictable.
Precisely. And this is where the book really challenges, I think, a common misconception that we can simply think our way out of these feelings.
You mean using logic and willpower to try to overcome our anxieties?
Exactly. The book argues that fighting our thoughts and feelings is often ineffective and can actually make them stronger. It's like trying to not think of a pink elephant. The more you try not to think about it, the more like that image pops into your head.
Okay, so if logic and willpower aren't the answer, then what is?
Well, the book suggests 4 alternative responses to those unwanted thoughts. Listen, acknowledge, watch, and consider. It's about, creating some separation between you and your thoughts, acknowledging that they're there without like getting swept away by them.
So it's not about surrendering to those thoughts, but rather like choosing how we respond to them.
Exactly.
Kind of like, I don't know, watching someone having like a political rant, right? You can observe their behavior, their intensity, without actually getting hooked by the content of what they're saying.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that our thoughts are just thoughts. They're not necessarily facts.
Right.
And we have the power to choose how we engage with them.
And this kind of leads us to a concept that's close to my heart, acceptance and self-compassion. Because if we're constantly battling our thoughts and feelings, where's the room for, kindness and understanding?
Right. And the book really emphasizes that we need to make space for those uncomfortable feelings, the fear, the shame, the anxiety. These are all just like part of the human experience.
Yeah.
Avoiding them only makes things worse.
Right.
It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater,
Yeah.
You can push it down for a while, but eventually it's going to pop back up with even more force.
Yeah. So instead of resisting those feelings, we need to kind of learn to like ride those waves, so to speak.
Exactly. And the book provides a really helpful guided exercise for practicing acceptance.
Oh.
It encourages you to actively engage with a specific feeling, to notice like its shape, its texture, its movement, without trying to, change it.
And this brings us to self-compassion, which I think can be a tricky concept for a lot of people, especially those struggling with perfectionism. It can almost feel a bit fluffy or self-indulgent.
I agree. And the authors do a great job of addressing that misconception. They reframe self-compassion as an essential everyday practice rather than a luxury or a reward.
So it's not about waiting until we, achieve some arbitrary level of success or perfection before we're allowed to be kind to ourselves.
Precisely. It's about those small, consistent acts of gentleness and acceptance that we offer ourselves no matter what.
Like what, for example, what does self-compassion actually look like in our, in our daily life? So we're talking about those small everyday acts of kindness, right? That we can offer ourselves.
Yeah.
What would be some examples of those? What does self-compassion actually look like in practice?
Well, think of how you would treat a close friend who's struggling.
Right.
You would offer them support, understanding, a listening ear.
Yeah.
Self-compassion is about extending that same kindness to yourself.
Yeah.
Even especially when you're feeling, inadequate or when you make a mistake.
So instead of beating ourselves up over a misstep, we just offer ourselves understanding and encouragement.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging that we're human, imperfect, and that, making mistakes is part of the learning process. And the book offers this really powerful image. Imagine you have like this inner critic that's constantly berating you, telling you you're not good enough. Would you ever speak to a friend that way?
Definitely not. I would be way more supportive and understanding, for sure.
Right. And self-compassion is about silencing that inner critic and replacing it with a voice of kindness and support. It's about recognizing that you deserve the same compassion that you would readily offer someone you care about.
Yeah, that's a really helpful reframe. So much of perfectionism seems to stem from this harsh inner critic, right? This constant pressure to meet like these impossibly high standards.
And this is where the book introduces a really important concept, the power of values.
Oh, yeah, I was hoping we'd get to that. Values seem to play a crucial role in breaking free from that perfectionistic mindset.
Absolutely. Because instead of being driven by, those external expectations or the shoulds, right?
Yeah.
That often fuel our anxiety. We can choose to be guided by what truly matters to us, those principles that give our lives meaning and purpose.
So it's about shifting our focus from what we should be doing to what we, genuinely value and want to do.
Exactly. And the book outlines 3 key characteristics of values that I think are really important to understand. First, values are freely chosen. They're not imposed on us by others. They come from within.
That makes sense. If we're living according to someone else's values, it's no wonder we feel like unfulfilled or constantly striving for something that, doesn't truly resonate with us.
Right. The second point the book emphasizes that values are directions, not destinations.
Ooh, I love that. So it's like values are a compass guiding us rather than a specific endpoint.
Yes. It's not about achieving some like ultimate goal or external validation. It's about living in alignment with what's important to us, moment to moment, day by day.
That takes the pressure off, doesn't it? It's not about like perfection. It's just about like direction. What's the third characteristic?
The third one is that values are entirely within our control.
What do you mean by that?
It means that no matter what's happening around us, the setbacks, the challenges, the external pressures, we always have the power to choose how we respond, how we act in accordance with our values.
That's incredibly empowering. It means that even amidst chaos and uncertainty, we still have this like inner compass to guide us. But I have to admit, like, identifying those values can be a bit tricky sometimes.
Yeah.
It's easy to fall into the trap of choosing values based on what we think we should value rather than like what truly resonates with us.
You're absolutely right. It's a process. And the book offers some helpful guidance on how to navigate that process. It starts with getting, really honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Creating some space from those external expectations.
Yeah.
And just like connecting with what truly matters to you, deep down. It might involve like asking yourself those big existential questions. Like, what do I want my life to stand for?
Oh, wow. Those are big questions.
Yeah, they are. And they might not have easy or immediate answers, but the book encourages us to just like be patient with the process, to trust that the answers will emerge as we create that space for reflection and self-discovery.
So we're not looking for like some perfectly crafted list of values. It's more about like an ongoing exploration, a journey of discovering what truly matters.
Exactly. And once we have a clearer sense of those values, the book offers a powerful tool for translating those values into action. SMART goals.
Right. We touched on SMART goals earlier. Can you remind us what that acronym stands for?
Yeah. So SMART goals are those that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And what's interesting is that this approach can be particularly helpful for those of us, who struggle with perfectionism.
Yeah, I can see how that would be the case, especially that achievable part.
Right.
Because perfectionists often set like these impossibly high standards, so it's helpful to have that reminder to like be realistic.
Exactly. And the book encourages us to break down those big, overwhelming goals into smaller, more manageable steps. So instead of aiming to, write a novel in a month, an achievable goal might be write for 1 hour every day.
It's about building momentum and also like creating a sense of accomplishment along the way. And how does the relevant part tie into values?
It's a crucial connection.
Yeah.
It's about making sure those goals are aligned with our values, that they're supporting, the kind of life we want to create. So if your value is, say, connecting with nature, a relevant goal might be go for a walk in the park 3 times a week.
It's about making sure that those goals are meaningful and motivating rather than just adding like to our to-do list.
Right. And the time-bound element is important too, because it creates like a sense of urgency and it helps us stay on track. So instead of vaguely aiming to like learn to play the guitar, a time-bound goal might be learn to play 3 basic chords on the guitar by the end of the month.
So it's about taking those values, those big picture aspirations, and translating them into like concrete, actionable steps. But even with all of these strategies in place, the self-compassion, the values clarification, the SMART goals, I imagine there's still going to be moments when those old perfectionistic tendencies kind of creep back in, right?
Absolutely. And the book addresses this head on, acknowledging that change is a process. It's not a destination. There will be setbacks. There will be moments when we fall back into those old patterns.
And that's okay, right? It's part of the process.
Exactly. It's not about being perfect at being imperfect. It's about being kind to ourselves when we stumble, learning from those experiences and keeping moving forward. And the book actually offers some really practical strategies for dealing with those inevitable bumps in the road. It talks about the importance of structuring our environment.
Wait, structuring our environment. What do you mean by that?
It's about creating an environment that makes it easier to engage in the behaviors that we want to cultivate and harder to fall back into those unhelpful patterns.
So it's like setting ourselves up for success by like being mindful of our surroundings.
Exactly. Think of it as like strategically designing your environment to support your goals. For instance, if you're trying to like reduce mindless snacking, you might keep like unhealthy snacks out of sight.
Oh, okay.
Or make healthier options, more readily available.
That makes a lot of sense. What are some other strategies the book suggests?
Another powerful tool is introducing consequences, also known as contingency management.
That sounds a bit intense. What does that involve?
It's actually quite simple and focuses on positive reinforcement. It's about rewarding yourself for engaging in the behaviors that you want to strengthen. And the rewards don't have to be anything major. It could be as simple as like allowing yourself to watch your favorite show after a productive workday, or, enjoying a relaxing bath after completing a challenging task.
So it's like giving ourselves little incentives to stay on track, to make the journey a bit more enjoyable.
Exactly. And the book also emphasizes the importance of accountability.
Right. Having that external support can be so helpful, especially when we're trying to break those ingrained patterns. What are some ways we can cultivate accountability?
It could involve like finding a friend or a mentor who can, support your goals, joining a group, or even just, keeping a journal to track your progress. The key is to have, someone or something to help you stay motivated, to celebrate your wins, and to offer encouragement when you face challenges.
It's like having like a cheerleader in your corner, reminding you that you're not alone in this journey. But even with all of this support, I imagine there's still going to be barriers, right? Things that trip us up and make it hard to stay on track.
Absolutely. And the book addresses some of those like most common barriers, like the busyness trap.
Oh, I know that one all too well. It's so easy to get like caught up in the whirlwind of daily life and tell ourselves that we're like too busy to prioritize those things that truly matter to us.
Right. And the book challenges that narrative.
Yeah.
It suggests that busyness is often a reflection of our choices and priorities. Even if those choices aren't always, conscious. It's not about like magically finding more time. It's about making deliberate choices about how we spend the time we have.
So instead of saying, I'm too busy to exercise, we might say, I'm choosing to prioritize work over exercise right now.
Exactly. That subtle shift in language can be really powerful. It helps us see that we have more agency than we might realize.
Yeah. And then there's that other big barrier, our need for certainty.
Yes, that's a big one, especially for perfectionists. We want to know for sure that we're making, the right choice before we take action, which can lead to like endless analysis paralysis.
Yeah, it's like we're stuck in this loop of trying to like predict the future and eliminate all possible risks, which of course is impossible.
Exactly. And the book encourages us to embrace uncertainty as an inherent part of life. It's not about eliminating risk altogether. It's about learning to tolerate discomfort and to make decisions even when we don't have all the answers.
So it's about shifting from a mindset of like control to a mindset of experimentation and learning.
Exactly. And that shift can be, incredibly liberating. It allows us to break free from that perfectionistic need to get everything right and to embrace the journey, even with its inevitable twists and turns.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive so far, We've explored the difference between adaptive and maladaptive perfectionism, the power of self-compassion and values, the importance of setting smart goals, and even touched on some practical strategies for overcoming those common barriers to change. But, as we've been saying, change is an ongoing process. It's not about achieving some like perfect state of being. It's about showing up for ourselves each day with kindness and a willingness to keep learning and growing.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore how to navigate those inevitable challenges, how to embrace imperfection, and how to cultivate resilience on this journey of managing anxious perfectionism.
So welcome back to our deep dive into the anxious perfectionist. We've explored, the roots of perfectionism, the power of self-compassion, values, the importance of setting those smart goals, and even, touched on some practical strategies for creating lasting change. But we all know that even armed with, the best tools, the best intentions, those old perfectionistic habits, they can kind of creep back in.
Yeah. Staying on track can be particularly challenging, I think, because, let's face it, the world we live in isn't exactly designed to support, those of us who struggle with perfectionism.
It feels like everywhere you turn, there's these messages telling us to like strive for more, be more, achieve more. It's like we're all on this treadmill that just never stops.
It's true. The book really highlights how those societal pressures and expectations can actually reinforce those perfectionistic tendencies that we have. We're constantly bombarded with these images of success, achievement, and this unattainable ideal of, having it all. It's easy to get caught up in comparing ourselves to others and feeling like we're constantly, falling short.
So how do we resist those pressures? How do we stay true to ourselves and those values that we've identified when, the world's constantly telling us that we need to be more, do more, achieve more?
Well, the book emphasizes the importance of consistent practice. It's not about, achieving some perfect state of being free from perfectionism. It's about building those mental muscles, those skills of self-compassion, mindfulness, and values-driven action.
So it's like going to the gym, but for our minds, basically. We need to show up regularly and do the work.
Exactly. And just like with physical exercise, there will be days when, we feel strong and motivated, and days when we just want to hit that snooze button. The key is to, be kind to ourselves on those days when we fall short, to acknowledge those perfectionistic tendencies when they arise, and to gently guide ourselves back on track.
Because let's face it, even with the best intentions, we're all going to stumble from time to time. We're going to mess up, make mistakes, face those setbacks.
Right, and that's okay. The book reminds us that, failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of the process. It's opportunity to learn, to grow, and to become even more resilient.
So instead of fearing failure, we can actually embrace it as a valuable learning experience.
Absolutely. Think of it as gathering data. Every time we stumble, we learn something new about ourselves, about, our triggers, about our patterns. And we can use that information to adjust our course, to refine our strategies, and to become, even more skilled at navigating those challenges.
That's a really empowering way to look at it. And speaking of empowering, I love how the book introduces this concept. Failure is an option.
Yes. It's not about aiming to fail, of course, but about recognizing that sometimes the most courageous and compassionate thing we can do is to step back from those pursuits that are no longer serving us.
It's about giving ourselves permission to quit, to change course, to say no to those things that are, draining our energy and joy, even if it means, letting go of some external measure of success.
It's about prioritizing our well-being. And sometimes that means, choosing a different path, even if it feels counterintuitive or goes against those, societal expectations we've internalized. The book offers this powerful analogy. Imagine you're hiking up a mountain, right? And you realize that you've veered off the trail. You could keep pushing forward, determined to reach the summit, even though you're lost and exhausted. Yeah. Or you could acknowledge that you're off course, retrace your steps, and find your way back to the trail.
It's a great analogy because it highlights the importance of pausing, reassessing, and just making sure we're still on a path that's aligned with our values and our well-being.
Exactly. And that path might lead us to a destination that's even more fulfilling and meaningful than we originally imagined.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into the anxious perfectionist. We've explored the complex interplay of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that contribute to, this often debilitating struggle. But more importantly, we've uncovered some powerful tools and strategies for managing those perfectionistic tendencies, for cultivating self-compassion, and for creating a more joyful and fulfilling life.
And as we wrap up, we want to leave you, our listener, with this final thought.
Yeah.
What would it look like to approach your life with a little more kindness, to embrace imperfection, and to celebrate those small victories along the way? What would it feel like to step off that treadmill of constant striving and savor the journey, even with its inevitable, bumps and detours?
That's it for this deep dive. We hope these insights have been helpful and inspiring. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep embracing the messy, imperfect beauty of being human.
See you next time on the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Until next time.
See you then.